My name is Parvati Vasanta. I work as project manager within the program Germany and Asia at Bertelsmann Stiftung in Germany. Bertelsmann Stiftung is a think tank with roughly 300 employees with headquarters in Berlin and Gütersloh in North Rhine-Westphalia and has offices in Barcelona and Washington. Our goal is to contribute to social reform, and our activities are exclusively and directly philanthropic in nature. In my position, I take a close look at economic and societal transformation processes in Asia and what implications they have for Germany and Europe. So part of my job is to develop and publish policy papers and to do research that contributes with recommendations for decision makers from politics and economy. I also conceptualize and realize events like last year in November in Singapore, where Bertelsmann Stiftung hosted a high-level roundtable with experts from politics, business, and civil society on the topic of social cohesion in Asia and Europe. At the moment, I'm busy and occupied with an online event series that discusses the question what the world will look like after COVID-19 and asks the question if we are heading towards a new systemic competition between liberal democracies and authoritarian systems. So, inclusive innovations mean products that are economically, socially, and ecologically sustainable and which benefit to society as a whole. So they are affordable, and so the products are affordable and therefore serve customers of the bottom of the pyramid. They come with low research and development costs and usually do not waste a lot of material or resources. So one example for a company that works with inclusive innovation is a company from India that is called Frontier Markets. It sells solar lamps and solar kitchen devices to people in rural areas who often do not have 24 hours access to electricity, but can gain a lot of energy by sunlight. To give you another example, also coming from India, the product developers of Tata Motors have developed a safe, qualitatively flawless delivery vehicle. It's called Tata Ace, and it has costed less than $50 million. This is around a tenth of the normal R&D budget of a comparable Western model. The Tata Ace is settled in the B2B segment and has secured better living standards for retail dealers and drivers. So the result of this specific concept of innovation is an inclusive socio-economic effect that promotes a sustainable social and economic development. Inclusive innovation as a concept is very much aligned naturally with the UN Sustainable Development Goals that are the blueprint, the global blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. But important to understand is that inclusive innovation has nothing to do with charity. It combines economic profitability with social benefits. It is a very interesting country to look at when we discuss the concept of inclusive innovation. For India, inclusive innovation is an imperative. The Indian market is very price sensitive, and always the question is being asked, how can we reach as many people as possible? So the question of social inclusiveness is genuine to their market rules. This is the first baseline when we look at India. A study that was published last year by the Bertelsmann Stiftung also analyzed the main basic conditions a country needs to have to be able to develop inclusive products. So, on the one hand, inclusive innovation must be driven by certain social, economic, or ecological pressures to address specific problems. On the other hand, a country must feature factors that enable inclusive innovation, such as stable institutions or a certain preference for cultural change. When we use this as a blueprint again for India, the country has huge potential and good basic conditions to develop products that are inclusive. And this was actually one of the key messages of our study that we conducted last year. So against this background, there's good reason to presume that India, with its specific structural conditions, is very robust to deal with COVID-19 because it is used to innovate under pressures. And the current situation, as we all know, certainly is a large pressure. The crux of the matter, however, will be how India will be able to deal with the humanitarian crisis and the rising inequalities as a result of the strict lockdown, as well as with the current economic slowdown. India must consider in its economic stimulus plan and upcoming structural reforms the support of social entrepreneurship that has now a very important role to play to access people who have lost their jobs and who are suffering a lot in this current situation. So social entrepreneurs and social startups can play a very critical role in creating a large number of new jobs and livelihood opportunities. This has partly already been done and considered in the economy agenda that was announced in May by the Indian government to help micro, small and medium scale enterprises by collateral-free loans. But there's always room for more. So I think there are chances that inclusive innovation is a concept that has a disruptive socio-economic effect in the current situation in India, especially when we look at the social losses of the COVID-19 crisis. An interesting question, and yes, I do think this is the case. So with COVID-19, we face a global economic slowdown, budget cuts, job losses, and people in many countries have to deal with existential problems. So I think about one thing we can be quite sure. We'll probably not have the same amount of money in our pockets than before, and we will be seeing a lot of rising societal inequalities worldwide. So on the demand perspective, we will have much less need for expensive, high-end technology and over-engineered products because those consumer groups will be probably shrinking. So the basic needs of all segments of the society, also including customers of the bottom of the pyramid, will be more important to address also in the so-called industrialized world. After COVID-19, in my point of view, we'll need to work on a much larger scale with a so-called mission-oriented innovation policy that offers solution to actually experienced specific problems and needs that therefore have a direct societal relevance. So inclusive innovation is a genuine component of a more sustainable economic growth concept. And I think this has, at least theoretically, arrived in the public discourse. So when we look at the World Economic Forum annual meeting this year in Davos, this was convened under the theme Stakeholders for a Cohesive and Sustainable World. It appealed to the companies that businesses should serve the interest of all, the society, rather than simply their shareholders. Their aim should not be maximizing profits, but use their capabilities and resources in cooperation with governments and civil society to address key issues of this decade. My message to startup founders would be that you are exactly on the right track if you want to tackle and address the social challenges that occur after and with the COVID-19 crisis. So if you include products in your business strategy that have been innovated with an inclusive purpose, you have the chance of being profitable and contributing to a healthy and sustainable economic growth. So I give a positive message, although I'm aware that public funding and getting investors for your business is very challenging at the moment. What I find difficult now when we talk about the COVID-19 situation is the fact that we discuss a lot about when life will go back to normal. When will we have overcome the crisis? When will the economy be recovered? When will we be allowed to travel again? When can I buy my next car, etc. I think we should much more talk about what the crisis has taught us and is still teaching us for the future. Personally, I think there will be not a simple going back to business as usual. And perhaps we should also consider the fact that we should not want to go back, at least not in every aspect of our lives and in some economical postulates. I think the chance of COVID-19 and of the crisis is that we are forced to find new solutions. Many companies needed to find new ways to innovate and to find creative answers, often with less resources and less materials, because the supply chains and delivery chains were cut. We saw companies, for example, in southern Germany, changing their production overnight to manufacture masks. And there are examples like this all over the world. And even the haute couture fashion industry in Paris, which is rather known for using tons of raw materials for their monthly collections rather than for their sustainability, wants to become greener and produce more locally. So in a very short time, we have learned to produce at lower costs and with less resources. And this disruptive momentum and key learning of COVID-19 is the ability to do more with less. And inclusive innovation describes exactly this concept.